I wanted to chat today on the path of awakening your heart. And many of you that have been following me on Instagram, that have been in my world, know that a few weeks ago I experienced a stroke, which led to emergency brain surgery and heart surgery. And so I'm finally feeling ready to kind of chat about the experience I had, because when I was in my stroke, they had a very divine experience of what many people would call like a near-death experience of really just the most beautiful expanse. And as someone that has been on the spiritual path now for about 14 years and being very careful with how I say spiritual, because there's so many different little nooks and crannies in this journey that actually take us away from our own awakening. And I wanted to bring in the big theme of awakening in this call, because that is what I very profoundly experienced when I was stroking and when my body was glitching, is that I awakened to the reality of what truly was. And I have spent many, many, many hours, years probably, in meditation. And the practices that I do in my body and that I share are really practices that bring us back to our true essence. And so they're not practices that are disembodied, that leave the body, that are all about the spiritual heights. They're practices that are deeply embedded within the body. They're practices that, rather than repressing the darkness and shoving it down into more darkness, we're actually illuminating it with the light, because light is the fastest way to disperse darkness. And so when we're on the path of awakening, we realize that every moment we are being called to awaken. And there's not just a few special people that get this opportunity, but there's not a lot of people that take the opportunity. And so everything that we're being reflected in our reality at every single moment is the exact vibration of where we are in time and space, right? It's linking into us and hooking into us, because that is what we are emanating from our body. And so this body is this means of communication, right, of the mind. And so if the mind is communicating a lot of fear in the body, then a lot of fearful circumstances are going to come into the realm of the body in the physical human dimension, right? If the mind is residing in a lot of love and peace and acceptance, then that is going to be reflected back in to the body through what the body is attracting in the world. And so this is where awakening is an act of self-responsibility, of knowing that everything that is around you has been self-created by you. And our soul isn't really here our soul is here. Your soul is here to do whatever it's doing right now. But the path of awakening is when we see our soul as this energetic signature that is wanting to experience very many different frequencies or energies or, exchanges, because the soul wants to see itself, right? And so what we're doing in this human dimension is really engaging and interacting and forming a relationship with many different experiences, with many different energies, so that the soul can truly know what it actually wants, what it actually desires. And so you wouldn't know that you wanted like calm and peace until you've experienced the turmoil of the opposite, of fear, of like hatred, of anger, right? The soul wants to have all of these experiences so that it can begin to choose the higher experiences for its evolutionary path, which is bringing in more light, more compassion, more love, more selflessness, more understanding. And naturally, the soul will want to gravitate towards things that are feeling good, expansive, evolutionary for the soul. It is our human mind, the fragmented mind, the limited mind, that begins to attach onto the experiences in the world and identify with them. Because the moment we start to identify and attach ourselves onto the experiences in the world is when suffering begins, right? So instead of the soul dancing with these energies of like being in the energy of anger, being in the energy of patience, being in the energy of worrying, being in the energy of trust and surrender, until the soul starts to begin to experience these energies, right? It's not going to know the difference. But the moment you can feel it in your system, you can begin to choose. But the moment you identify with something as either it being good or bad or right or wrong, or I need this in my life right now, I need this to be okay, I need this to be free, like this is my source of love outside of me, then we start the loops of suffering where the soul then becomes like contracted into this really dense energy where it can no longer move and change and evolve. And so in this human dimension, right, we carry so many identities. We carry the identity of like the achievements that I have, the mother that I am, like if you're in partnership, partner that I am, the wife, the husband, like the whatever it is, we begin to identify with the contracted experience of society. And when we get stuck in these identities, thinking that they are who we are, is when our soul stops evolving or feels stuck or feels constricted. Because the truth is the soul is so dynamic. The soul is so dynamic, and it is without identity. It is without time. It is without past and future. And so why I wanted to bring this through now is because throughout all of my years of meditation, and the path of awakening is truly surrendering to what is available at the moment and choosing if it's the energy that you want to dance with, right? And being able to shift into different circumstances if the energy that you're identifying with is no longer serving you. And this is where our soul starts to feel like almost suffocated when we're living within the paradigm that has been set out by society. The job that we go to every single day, maybe like the partnership that like we're stuck in, or the like friendship that like we've identified with, like what kind of friend we are, and we're always stuck showing up as that role when we're evolving and we're changing and we're constantly dancing with our experience. And so the paradigm of society keeps us trapped within the limitations of the fragmented mind and the human body, of like having to be the same, show up in the same way. And so what we're doing in this human experience when we're awakening is we're untethering from all of those concepts. We're untethering from the attachments to the world. We're untethering from like the deeply held contracts that society has set for us. Because when our soul is evolving, it's evolving in and out of energy continuously, constantly, like it never ends. And so when we're meditating and we're sitting inside of ourself and we're forming a really deep relationship with ourself, it's so that we can truly know what feels good in our system and what feels contractive in our system. And so good would be like expansive and light. And I shouldn't say good because there's no good or bad, right? It's just one is expansive and open and light, and the other energy closes us down. One energy is very parasympathetic nervous system. The other energy is sympathetic nervous system. One energy is God consciousness, and one energy is the ego, right? The ego contracts us into fear, and God opens us up into love and light, because it is through us, this vessel, this communication channel, that the source of our life speaks through. And so that's what's important, is that every moment you're awakening, and at every moment you're a channel to the energy that you are connecting in with. And that's why it's self-responsibility. If you're not connecting in with the energy that you desire to be in this world, you have to shift that, right? If you're not awakening to the path that you truly want to live in, you're feeling contracted all the time, you have to have the courage to shift that. And so through forming this relationship with ourselves, we really start to see like what lights us up. What mode of expression are we here to share with the world? Because we're not here to be alone, yet we are the one thing, the one vessel that we're in relationship with, and everything else is a reflection of our mind. And so when you begin to journey into this relationship with self. That is the path of awakening, right? And it's always happening at every moment. You can't help it. You are always being shown who you are through what you're seeing. And so the thing comes in where is that what you want to see today? Is that who you want to be in this moment? Is this the energy that you want to be exchanging? And if it's not, you get to create these beautiful boundaries with your soul, where you get to be responsible for your own personal energy. You get to be responsible for the light that you're emanating in the world. You get to be responsible for how you're showing up to your life, for knowing that you're creating all of it. There's no one's doing anything to you, right? It is all you having your experience. It should all be neutral. And so as we're becoming more and more of who we truly are, by forming a deeper relationship with ourselves and listening to our deeper intuition, right? Our deeper sense of self, we're really moving away from the attachments of the mind, the attachments of time, right? Linear time, point A to point B, past, present, future, right? We're moving away from the attachments of what we're identifying with within our lives, within ourselves, the roles that we have taken on and been inside of for maybe too long, right? We're unplugging from the stories that are no longer serving us. And so what I found being like an avid meditator and doing this work and really empowering myself to see that everything that is in front of me is for me. Is it showing me what I want to see? Is it showing me the higher aspects of myself? And if it's not, what can I shift right now that would allow me to become more of who my soul wants me to be? And the soul's here to dance, to play, to be neutral, to experience, to just experience life. And so at the beginning, and I'm going to save you some details, but at the beginning of when I was having a stroke, when I woke up early in the morning and my body was glitching and my whole right side was like numb and I couldn't remember the little things. Like there was this over soul, I can call it, that was observing everything and was observing the body glitching, the nose leaking, like the human form, like putting toothpaste on the face to like clean the face. I was observing this and was like, wow, like with so much curiosity and also a little bit of confusion. Like I was still very much attached, a part of me, to this earthly dimension of like what's happening. And I was letting my chickens out and things were falling everywhere. And I actually opened up my phone because I was like, I should probably tell someone about this because like something's happening to me. And I actually didn't know how to use my phone. Like I didn't know how to form sentences in a text message. I stared at it for 20 minutes before anything would come out. And I tried to speak and my words were like jumbled mashed potatoes. Yet all the words were in my mind. Yet in my mind, I was texting, yet my body couldn't perform the action that was needed. So I eventually ended up figuring it out and sending lots of cryptic messages that alerted somebody. And, you know, when I was figuring out in the midst of my stroke what was going on, I was redeveloping some words. I was redeveloping some ability to do some stuff because it was in the mainframe, like it was in the mind, but the mind was slowly sliding away from me. And when I got picked up to go to the hospital, it was like an hour-long drive. And that's when the most potent experience happened for me, because I actually began to release, and not even consciously, like anything of this body. And I realized I dropped into like the deepest state that one could possibly be in this out of the human experience, really. But it's when the tethers of the mind, all of the past hurt, like all of the things that are like grabbing our consciousness and distorting our reality, the wrong perceptions, the skewed lens in which we view reality, like all of those little things were no longer there. And I could no longer speak. Charlie was driving me there and I could no longer speak and just ask me questions. And I was just in the purest state of grace. And I just like felt like I had this silly smile on my face as like light was pouring into my body. And there was nothing, in the most beautiful nothing. Like time didn't even exist. I remember I kept looking at the clock and thinking it was so silly because it was all eternity. And there was this part of me that was outside of me, understanding the whole timeline of me, observing like the non-duality, that there is no black or white, in and out, up and down, observing eternity, where like I was headed into the most open expanse and it felt so good, so good. And I actually can't even say that it felt good. My human says it felt good, but it just was. Like it was perfection. It was the most natural state I could have ever been in this human form, like having a human form. And so it took me an hour to get to the first hospital and a couple hours in ambulance to get to the next hospital. But in that whole span of time, it just seemed so silly that all these doctors were like scanning my head, x-rays, CT scans, MRIs, telling me I had a brain clot. And I was just sitting there in the most divine presence without any attachment or duality or judgment of what was happening, but thinking it was all so silly that this whole like thing was happening, like that they were tending to this and doing this to the human body. It all seemed so trivial. And so the state that I found myself in was like a complete clearing of the fragmented mind, all gone. And that's what made it so profound, because it felt like the most natural, original state that we could have descended from, because a part of me wasn't even identified with the body. It was identified with the all-encompassing, all-embracing, infinite, vast expanse of space. And there's no words that I can say that can describe it. I'm trying to speak about it, but there's nothing. And that's why it's been so hard for me to come on and talk about it, because if we've never tapped into those states in our human form, it's impossible to know how limited we choose to live in reality. Like, it's so limited. The mind is so limited, and we're perceiving a timeline in which we're walking towards something, but we're never going to arrive because it's an illusion, right? We're perceiving all these things that we need to accomplish and do in our day, but there's nothing to accomplish because that's all an illusion. Like, we're here to be the most present humans for this one experience that we're having, me talking to you right now. And that's it. And yet everything will happen because of that. Like, it's not to say like everything would crumble if we were in that state. We would be sharing this vast amount of love that was flowing through our being and seeing every person as a reflection of the light that we're sharing. It would be the most beautiful dance because it would just be purity flowing through us. And so until I got gas masked and then had my brain surgery, the moment I came to was the most intense duality I've experienced. And it wasn't, I can't even call it duality, because the other part wasn't the opposite end of the pole, like the part of the bliss and the love. But it was when my mind started to download like the experiences that this human body had had, because we store everything in our muscles, right? The mind can repress so many things, but our whole experiences are stored in the muscles and the tissues of the body. Like, they don't go away until we clear them and work through them. And so when my mind started to like download this body and I woke up and I was like in the hospital, in ICU, hooked up to like a million different like drips, is when like it all came in. And if I could describe the duality, which it wasn't, but that's the only way the human mind would understand it, is it was everything, and then it contracted so small into separation again, right? And so the opposite of separation isn't wholeness, right? Wholeness is what's natural. And separation is what fragments when we perceive ourselves as different than what is the all. And this is where the individualization of the soul comes in. And this is where we have our own specific journeys, because we're journeying back home to wholeness. We're journeying back home to the part of ourself that we truly are, that we don't tend enough in the day-to-day. right? We're journeying back to the essence that is us. And so I wanted to share that experience because when my human woke up, and I would say when my human fell asleep in the body again, and I was awake in that other dimension, when my human fell asleep in the body, it was heavy, heavy to be back in the realm of separation, heavy to be back in the density of the experience, heavy to be hearing that I have to have heart surgery because I have a huge hole in my heart. That's always been there. Heavy with like all the questions of like, why did that happen? Heavy with like whatever had brought me to that moment where my soul literally was like, this needs to change. I will get so loud until you feel it. And so the separation that occurs in the body is one of like, we perceive this as the all. And yet when we leave this, we get welcomed into the all. Like we get welcomed back into heaven. And that is when we're untethered from the limited mind. And when we're perceiving ourselves as separate from others, when we're judging others, when we are living in fear, when we are thinking things need to be any way other than how they truly are, we are living in separation and we're creating suffering. And we're tethering to like all the things that are holding us back from who we truly are. And so that is where it's like, we work with the mind to cultivate heaven. We work with the mind every time we feel an attachment that like, I need this from outside of myself. We are being shown where we are empty inside, where we need to begin to cultivate a deeper relationship with self, whether it's learning how to cultivate the deep trust that we are completely provided for at all times, whether we cultivate the deep love that I don't need anyone outside of me to love me to be whole, right? We're cultivating the deep worth of like, no actions that I make will allow me to feel worthy unless I feel worthy inside of myself, worthy because I am, right? Not worthy by what I do. And so there's so many layers that we are here to untether from so that we can drop into deeper states of heaven within our mind, deeper states of love and light in our bodies. So that when we are being shown our outside world, it is becoming closer and closer to orbiting the field of who we truly are. And when that happens, everything will feel light. Everything will just fall away. We won't have to always show up to that job in a specific way. We won't always have to feel like we need to show up in a relationship in a different way. We are just going to be showing up as we truly wholly are. And whatever is meant to be within the frequency of who we are will arrive. And whatever's not meant to be there will fall away. And there's no forcing things that don't match the energy, right? Because otherwise it'll feel like friction. It'll feel hard. It'll feel clunky. Our soul will be screaming at us because we're just simply not listening. And so we're using this body to feel, right? The biggest illusion is that the mind is running the show. The body is feeling its way through the world. And when we feel like we feel a lot, and if we're constantly feeling things that are in conflict with what we truly want, we start to disassociate from the body and live solely in the mind. We live in the contents of like the future or the past or the regrets or like always striving towards what we desire. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's really checking yourself if you're truly living in the body of like, yeah, it feels good to walk towards that right now. It feels good to pour my energy into that right now. Or I'm going to bypass how my body feels. All the health symptoms show up and I'm just going to like keep showing up the way that I was so that everything is like comfortable for the people around me or comfortable in the circumstances I've set up for myself. Because the truth is your soul is always walking into the unknown. And the moment it's comfortable, it's complacent, right? And so it should always feel like in the soul that you're on the edge. You're on the edge of something, right? Because you're constantly welcoming in energies that are expanding you, energies that you haven't yet felt. Because again, the soul desires to experience all these different energies, not the same things again and again and again. Because that's not evolution. And that's not how we come more into who we are and move back into our wholeness. That is our birthright. And so when we meet life this way, And we really allow the deaths to come in. Because I have to tell you, the other end of that, when we open to the dying, is just pure expanse, bliss, grace, divinely held. Nothing could ever go wrong, ever. There's no question, right? There's no time. There's no rush. There's no striving to be anywhere than you're not. And so you just drop into the truest essence of who you are. She's walking towards the cliff at all times, right? She's constantly seeking expansion, constantly reflecting, wondering, what is here for me? Not, I can't believe that happened to me. Like, poor me. No. You rise into the wholeness that you are. You rise into the responsibility of your soul. You rise into this vessel as the greatest gift that you are given, where you get to experience all the energies on the planet. And you get to rise into the fact that you are allowed to experience the greatest love, the greatest compassion, the greatest care, the greatest amount of giving that you could give, because everyone is just a reflection of you. And if it's a part of you, wouldn't you just wrap it in your arms and love it and embrace it and ask it what it needs? Like, how can I help you today? How can I serve you today? Right? When you're in overflow, you're just reaching in and grabbing it all and nurturing it and tending it. And when you're in deficiency, you're reaching for it in order to fill you up. And so it's all the energy of expansion and contraction, and understanding what is going to bring you into more of your wholeness and take you away from the illusions of separation. Yeah. And it's not what comes naturally to a body that's living in separation, but it is your natural state. It is your natural state. And it's just spiraled so far from what it truly is. And that's why there's so much conflict. There's so much disease. There's so much suffering. There's so much that doesn't need to be that way. That is a creation of our minds, a creation of living in the individualized, separated, fragmented mind. And in wholeness, it's all blossoming. In wholeness, it's all flourishing. When you find your wholeness, it's like a majestic garden that is opened up to you, and you welcome yourself back. But you have to choose. You have to choose. And the thing is whatever you're choosing right now is perfect for you. Right? Whatever you're choosing right now is actually what you want. Because it is. But then you get to calibrate your energies to, do I want something different? And then if you truly do, the different will arise. Because it's an instant reflection. It's an instant reflection. And it's perfect the way that it is. And yet you're always inside the driver's seat, driving you back home, which is really not going anywhere, but moving deeper into who you truly are, which is light and which is love, which is the release of the suffering, which is choosing the way of the heart and being in that frequency, and constantly reminding yourself to be in that frequency if you leave it. So that was my little download for today. It's been building for a while, so I hope you got something out of it, and you don't need to. But this work will change your life. It really will. I had no fear, and when I woke up, everything was back online. It was a miracle, but there's no difficulty in miracles. And so it's really about your belief and your faith in yourself and your mindset and your perspective on life that will allow you to meet whatever situation that comes your way with empowerment, with grace, with ease, with full trust and surrender. Because the moment that fear comes in, it contracts the body. And that is when we don't move through it with grace and ease. And so we train our body to be open and to surrender to what is, so that when what is really tough, we're still surrendering and opening. And we're allowing it to be there because it's for us. And we're allowing to do what it needs to do to bring us deeper into ourselves so that we come home to ourselves. And then your trust brings in health and wholeness into your body. Your surrender brings in more love and expansion. But the fear brings in more sickness and contraction and illness. And so again, the soul is just moving through these energies, and you're not here to judge them. You're here to welcome them into your being and ask what they're here for, what they're here to show you. And they're always here to show you how to become more of who you truly are, whether you perceive them as good or bad. Right? It's all reflections. And the last thing I will say is the path of awakening to who you are, not getting trapped in like more illusions of awakening, but awakening to your body, awakening to the wholeness that you are, to releasing the tethers of your mind and the attachments in the material world. This is like the radical path, because a lot of people won't choose it. Yet when you choose it, you become the reflection of that light. And by you choosing it, more people that are orbiting your sphere will see possibility, because you will be welcoming them home, because you will not be casting judgment upon them or your distorted perspectives upon them. And when you welcome them home, right, you're shifting how they also perceive themselves. So that's what needed to come through today. And I hope you have a lovely day. And I'll see you next time when something else needs to come through. Bye.